Salamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh, everyone. This is Mr. Middlepath coming at you all with another video. And today's topic is, should you marry a virgin? And the obvious answer is yes, you should. But I think when people ask this question, they want a little bit more of a discussion on this. So, can you even marry a virgin in the first place? Can you even find a virgin in the first place? If a girl says she's a virgin or a guy says that, can you trust that person? If the girl or the guy, and we'll stick mainly with girls here because the vast majority of my viewership are males, not to exclude anyone, but I will cover a little bit about guys and girls as well. If someone is not a virgin and you like that person, should you go ahead with the marriage, or is that something that you should just call off and say, I can't deal with this, I need to move on? So I think those are the questions that we're going to look at today. And it helps to review some of the other videos that I made before, one of them being chastity versus virginity, where I say that virginity is something that you can't really prove. You can't prove someone is a virgin or not. If they're lying or if they're telling the truth, it's really, really difficult, almost impossible to prove. It's almost like ilm al-ghayb to some degree. But what we can look at is chastity, chaste behavior, people that act with modesty. And this is more than just niqab, more than just hijab. There are plenty of people that wear hijab or niqab that are not modest, not chaste, right? How we see chastity is how they behave, who are their friends, how do they behave with people of the opposite gender. Very important, right? Just because someone has a beard and prays 5 times a day doesn't mean that they're chaste or they're modest if they're always hanging out with girls, or if they're too friendly with the opposite gender and they're not a bit more formal and respectful and have a clear and obvious boundary when you're looking at them outside in. So that's there. Now let's say that we find someone who is chaste and someone who is shy. One of my friends who's a sheikh once said, and I do agree with him on this one, that just because you find someone who is modest and very shy does not exclude the fact that they could have been in a relationship or could have done something haram. Simply because we live in an age and a time of fitna. This is really the time of fitna. It's very difficult to find someone who the fitna has not touched or who hasn't gone through some type of trial or tribulation. So, does that mean that virgins are not around? Absolutely not. I think it's very easy and it's very common still to find people who are virgins and women who have protected their virginity and have not gone into premarital sex. I think what is a bit more difficult, or a lot more difficult, but not impossible, is to find someone who has never been in a relationship before. This, I think, is what is much more difficult. To find a girl who has never been in a relationship or even talked to a guy is very difficult. And also to find a guy who's never been in a relationship or never talked to a girl, this is also a bit more difficult too. Although again, it's not impossible. You do have people who Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has protected from those kind of fitnas from a very young age. And they're usually very high quality people. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala knows best. Even if you were to talk to, I don't know, your cousin, I don't know, oh my God, my cousin. Just follow the example. Even if you were to talk to your cousin who lives in the remote island of the Fiji Islands, and you want to marry her, she probably is talking to her other cousin on some other remote Fiji island who proposed to her and said, oh, I'll talk to your dad later when I finish my degree and I get a good job, and she's just naively waiting for him. The point is that there's always competition, right? And this is not necessarily a bad thing. This is just something that's going to spur you to move forward. So, should you move forward if she says that she's a virgin? Should you trust her, right? Or should you trust that person if they say they've never been in a relationship? You can't really not trust it, but, and I'm not saying you should be skeptical, nor should you be judgmental, but you should judge without being judgmental. What I mean is that you should judge whether the person is a suitable wife or husband for you without judging them as bad or good, if that makes sense. So you want to avoid being arrogant and judgmental, but you do need to judge whether they're suitable for you. And promiscuity and promiscuous behavior and flirtatious behavior is, generally speaking, always going to be a red flag. I mean, even non-Muslims and even people who don't hold virginity to a very high standard still consider promiscuous behavior to be a red flag and tell people that you should stay away from people like that. even when it comes to halal relationships, if someone has married and divorced and married and divorced and married and divorced, this generally shows bad luck. But usually people will not consider that person to be unlucky. They'll either consider that the person is foolish and making bad decisions and is a bad judge of character, or that they're undisciplined, and it's generally considered a red flag. Even if it's technically their halal relationships, it's not considered to be the behavior of a stable person to marry and not an unmarried and marry and unmarried so many times. Same thing with someone who has had a lot of relationships in the past. So the general advice that scholars have given when we look at situations like this is that if you meet someone and they're chaste and they're a good Muslim and the deen is shining on them, but they messed up and they did something and they were stupid and whatever they did, they were young and they didn't know what they were doing, then if you can, try and overlook it. But if you see a pattern of destructive behavior or a pattern of immoral behavior, then it's better not to take that risk. This is my genuine advice. The more someone has had boyfriends, then the more unlikely they are to form a strong bond with you. So I remember one story where a friend of mine, this was a long time ago, he wasn't, and I wasn't as practicing back then, but we did our best. But he was dating some girl that went to my school, and it turns out she dated 15 guys before him. 15 is a lot. And strangely enough, I'm not saying that she is not a virgin. I do genuinely believe that she was, based on the evidence and the story we had at the time. But she didn't have sexual relations with them, but she was in relationships with them, with 15 other guys before this dude, where she took off her hijab for them or kissed them or whatever, right? Now, 15 guys, even if she is still a virgin, is a lot of dudes, and I would never recommend anyone to go for someone like that. And I could see it from a mile away that, this girl is for sure going to take off her hijab. And she ended up taking off her hijab. She married someone else from another dude that also went to my school. In the end, she married some other guy. That didn't work out between her and my friend. But that dude also wasn't known for being practicing either. So take that for what it is, Some people just don't have a lot of ghira and are more comfortable with that kind of stuff. And this is for those who are trying to be practicing. You need to find someone who takes their deen seriously. And you're taking a very big risk when you get married. So the answer of should you marry a virgin is yes, you should marry someone who is a virgin or as close to being a virgin as possible. If you like someone who's not a virgin and you see that they're very, very practicing and you feel like you can handle it, then by all means go ahead. So my advice for those type of people, right? One of my Islamic teachers when we were young recommended us. He said, guys are leaders in the relationship and in marriage, and you need to be more mature than your wife to be. Women mature much faster than men. So his recommendation was for men to be 10 years older than their wife. And that's not always possible for most people in most relationships. But the key takeaway is that you need to be more mature. So if you are a virgin, you should marry a virgin. The reason being is that you should watch my retrospective jealousy, is that if you are not, if you've never been in a relationship and you're about to marry someone who's been in a ton of relationships, or even just have more sexual experience than you, you're gonna get jealous, you're gonna feel insecure, and you're not gonna like that. And it's going to bother you and it's gonna upset you. And it could spill over into negative behavior where you start being suspicious of the person even when there's no grounds for suspicion. And I'm going to get into that in a second. For someone who has more experience and has repented to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and they're chaste now, they're not involved in relationships or haram sexual activities, if they were to marry someone who's also repented, they're more aware of signs to look out for, red flags to look out for, whether the repentance was genuine or not, things that are red flags, ways to know whether someone is cheating or not. They're going to be more experienced and they're going to be aware of how to pick up on those type of things. Whereas someone who's never been in a relationship before or has protected himself in that way, who's not as experienced, might and ends up liking someone who does have a past, might end up treating that person with a past very roughly and very harshly. Why? Because they don't have the experience to differentiate between a genuine red flag and just a suspicion that they have in their own head. So it's good if someone has a past to marry someone who also has a past and repented from, or someone who has done less than them, who is also a virgin. But if you are a virgin who's never been in a relationship, it would be better for you to marry someone who has not been in a relationship before and is like you on your level. And you can build and bond and grow together. That's not to say that you can't build and bond and grow with someone who's had a past, but it's just easier to do so. Now, some people might ask, yeah, can you build and grow and bond with someone who's already bonded before? Yes, absolutely. And it really depends on the type of past that the person has. Someone who has had a lot of zina and had a lot of sex because they like it, it's probably difficult for you to bond with a type of person like that, unless, once again, they feel very guilty about their past and they feel very ashamed of their past and they really want to go forward with being on the deen and so forth. Still, someone like that should marry someone who is experienced. Either they've had multiple wives or multiple marriages, or they've just married a lot, or maybe they come from a background where they have a past and then they messed up and they've repented from it. But the experience level, especially for the guy, the experience level needs to match the girl or be a lot higher, right? And that doesn't necessarily mean that the guy has to have a haram past. It could be just that he's experienced with marriage and so forth, and he's bringing another girl on. And you can see in the way that people talk about relationships and marriage, the way people talk about relationships and marriage, for those who have been in a lot of relationships and been in a lot of marriages, you will see that when they talk about it, it's not as big of a deal for them. It's not as big of a deal to them, relationships and breakups and so forth. It's like, whatever, it just didn't work out. But you will find that people who haven't been in marriage or relationships before, it's much more important for them. And it's much more meaningful for them. And it's much more devastating for them if it doesn't work out. And you will see that trend, which is why, again, it's good to bond with someone who hasn't bonded with someone else before. Now, if someone has a past where they haven't done zina, or they're almost a virgin, where they just kind of did a little bit, but they were not coming from a point of view of, I want to do zina, I want to do it. It was more coming from a point of view of, I had a relationship and I messed up, or I was naive, or I was pressured, or whatever. Then those people, again, you can call them almost virgins, and almost virgins will also be pretty easy to bond with, especially if their past relationship or past experience was a very negative one. Then you're gonna kind of step in. If you two are meeting with each other and you two are getting along and you two are getting to know each other, you're kind of gonna be the one who's gonna replace all of the bad memories with good memories. And we see this, right? A girl who's been through a very negative divorce, very negative marriage in the past with a very abusive person, if the next guy comes and he's really good, she's going to attach to him very strongly, because she's going to compare the positive experience of the new guy with the very negative experience of the old guy. She's like, thank God I'm out of that, right? Especially if the new guy is also very manly and strong and masculine, but he's just the good guy, right? So that is there too. But again, if her past is just a lot of relationships, a lot of zina and so forth, then, I wouldn't recommend that. Unless you have a past where you have experience that matches that or surpasses that. And the scholars say this, when I was doing research for this topic, the scholars have said multiple times that if someone is on their deen and they're very chaste and they're very modest and they're very good, and you can tell that the deen is shining on them, but they messed up, or they were stupid in their past, or they did something wrong, then try and overlook it, because we all do something wrong. But if you find that their past is something that is repetiting and repeating itself, and they're always messing up, or they're had a lot of relationships, or a lot of promiscuous behavior, or a lot of a pattern of a negative type of behavior, then you shouldn't risk it and just move on, right? And what people are comfortable with is going to change from person to person, but I've seen scholars say that even 2 relationships is one too many. Like, they would even look at just one being okay. If she got messed up once, or he messed up once, then whatever. But too many times is too many times, and they wouldn't risk it if the guy who wants to get married is a virgin, has never been in a relationship. So that's there. Now, keep in mind, people, that there's always hope. I've seen the most messed up stories, guys. You have no idea. I've worked in a psychiatric hospital before. I've seen the most, and I've helped like former addicts, and I've been in the psychology game for a while. Although I'm not officially have my PhD in psychology, but I've worked in the psychiatric hospital, psychology field, counseling, all that stuff in America and in Israel. I've seen the most messed up stuff, the most messed up stuff you could possibly think about, and these people somehow still find love, and they still get married, and they still find someone that accepts them for their past. And that's just the way Allah does it. Sometimes someone messes up so much and they think they can't get married, but Allah brings someone along who's very understanding of their past. So there's 2 things we need to take away from this. 1, people lie about their past, right? 2, sometimes people are so guilty they'll admit their past to their significant other. Why? Because they just feel so bad about themselves that they want someone to accept them for who they are. So they're saying, look, I did all this stuff, can this person still accept me for who I am? If they can't, then it might not be true love, and then they feel the need to like spill all the beans. So if someone is spilling all the beans, take it with a grain of salt, right? Sometimes people are trying to cover up for their past, or switch the story out, or not give you all of the information because they're like, I want to give just enough that I'm not lying, but not too much that they leave me. And people are more likely to lie to people that they love than people that they don't care about, and that's one of the realities. So a girl who knows that she's not a virgin and she's afraid that she might not bleed on the wedding night, or the guy might have some questions for her, might make up a story about how she was forced to do something she didn't want to do, and it wouldn't be true, right? She's just making it up. And that's messed up, because that ruins it for the girl that actually was forced to do something that she doesn't want to do. A guy might lie about his past, and then this is actually a true story, and then the girl finds his Instagram page full of likes with woman models pages. So stuff like that happens all the time. So it's important to, look at their behavior in the here and now, right? And whether you should talk about your past with someone else, Islamically, you really shouldn't, right? Because it's just going to activate jealousy, it might activate suspicious behavior. You should only really talk about the past if the past is part of the present. You need help resolving certain things, right? So a guy who is getting over something that he did in the past, might be a little guilty about it, talks a little bit about it with his wife, probably won't go anywhere. It might just make her jealous. Same thing with the girl talking about her past with a dude. It might just make the guy jealous. So just keep that information to a minimal, right? There's no need to share all of that stuff unless it's part of the present, unless it's affecting the here and now. So some dudes, and this is something I heard from another psychiatric hospital doctor, who didn't work in the same psychiatric hospital as me, he worked in a different one, was talking about how there's a lot of people who are doing the sin of masturbation and watching pornography, and they think that after they get married they're going to stop, but then they keep doing it. So people who are still involved in something, or maybe they went through a recent breakup and they're getting over it. And I think in those type of situations, it might be beneficial for the husband or the wife to be aware of it. That way, anything that happens, the awareness you'll get to see if the person will be understanding about your past, but it also removes any suspicion on you. So if someone comes and messages you and that's your ex, or something happens and you mess up, like if it's a sin that you're doing, then the other person's aware of it and they can help you, or they can help you through it. Be like, yeah, it's okay. Big difference between someone who doesn't know anything and then someone messages his wife or her husband out of the blue, like, who is this? Versus someone like, oh, okay, you didn't block them, but they're messaging you through somewhere else. Next time they call, pass the phone to me and I'll answer it. And I actually had a situation like that. I knew of a family that the guy's ex-girlfriend always would call him. And even when his wife would answer the phone for him to tell her to go away, she would still be rude and not go away. So you have crazy people like that. So if you're in a crazy situation like that, it's good to let the other person know. But if something is so in the past, leave it in the past. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala knows best. Summary of all of this: should you marry a virgin? Absolutely, you should marry a virgin, or as close to a virgin as possible. If you're in love with someone already and they probably are not a virgin, and you see that they're very, very, very good and they're a very good Muslim, and their past is not that bad according to your judgment, then by all means you can continue, ask a scholar, get their advice on the situation beforehand. And if they say, yes, it seems that, you should trust this person and go ahead and go forth, then go forth, inshallah. And may Allah make it easy for you. Last but not least, please like and subscribe. Leave any comments that you might have below, any agreements or disagreements. I hope that this was helpful, everyone. And last bit of advice before I go is, we live in a time of fitna. Really, who knows if Masih ad-Dajjal and Antichrist is right around the corner or not. We really don't know, but it seems that way, that we're very close to some huge type of fitna going on. So because we live in an age of fitna, take what you can get. If you see someone who's really, really, really good and they messed up a little bit, don't be too judgmental. Just take what you can get, as long as who you're getting is a good Muslim and a very good person right now. Hope that helps, guys. Take care. Peace out. Salamualaykum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.